everybody. BA is on vacation, so we are taking over SEC Country Live all week long. I personally cannot wait. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson, also the host of Roll Tide Daily, host of the Mississippi State podcast, More Cowbell, Brandon Walker. You guys, I'm pretty excited about this.
I am too. I'm glad to have you guys sitting on the desk with us. A little bit less of a Georgia shade to the show, I guess, without Brandon Adams sitting here, but this should be a pretty fun week for sure.
Yeah, a few Alabama topics, actually a few Mississippi State topics as well. You getting your fans over here?
Fantastic. I get to talk too. All right, Mississippi State topics will be coming up, but we got a lot of SEC stuff to talk about, a lot going on this weekend. I couldn't be more excited.
And some of you guys might know me. I do some shows on the Dog Nation platforms, and I usually produce for this show Behind the Glass. Michael Shalaba, Patrick Shanley, Michael Carvel, Nate Gettleman, all back there behind the glass getting this show rolling.
Is that your way of saying we should shout out the production
crew?
Okay,
yeah,
cool. Okay, I'll make
exactly
sure
what that is.
Sneak that in. All right, guys, we have a first and 7 for you today. 7 awesome topics, and we are going to start with number 1, which is the brand new SEC grad transfer rule. One of the hot topics from the SEC spring meetings from the coaches was exactly this, and here is what they came up with. On Friday, the official ruling, SEC graduates can now transfer within the conference and play immediately. There's also a proposal to allow players at SEC schools that are under NCAA mandated postseason bans to transfer immediately within the conference. Let's start with this first bullet point here, and let's really break this down, guys. Mike, we'll start with you. You agree with this, right? I personally think this is a long time coming. You agree too?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, listen, I know that I'm a Bama guy. I got on here and talk about Nick Saban. Nick Saban personally was not a huge fan of what this rule was and kind of, how it was coming to the table, but I like this rule. As a former player, I like this rule. I'm all for liberal transfer rules. I think that you should be able to do as much as you want to, especially as a guy that's graduated college. That's what you signed on the dotted line for. You signed to show up and get your degree and do everything that those coaches asked you until you did that. And so afterwards, I think you can, listen, you can go anywhere you want to now within the SEC. The problem therein lies for me is that I'm not sure fans are going to love this rule, right? I mean, I think that as we continue to move along this line, I'm happy because I'm a former player. But I think fans, when you start to see some of your starters head to another school, head to maybe your rivalry school within the SEC East, within the SEC West, you're building on something, and then all of a sudden a guy, from Mississippi State possibly shoots out and goes to a different school. I don't think fans are going to like that in the end. So I'm all for it. I'm all about grad transfers. I think that Nick Saban was right to kind of stick up the way he did, but we're at a different time right now in terms of college football and the players. I'm just cautioning fans at this point to be a little bit more hesitant before you jump on board and say, this is what we need to do, because I think it could come back to bite some people in the butt.
I don't know that it will. It could, but every rule could come back to bite teams in the butt. Every single rule there is could be exposed with a loophole. It could be this, could be that. But number one, I think it's kind of trickle-down economics. Take care of the players first.
Right.
Take care of the players first. Let the players have the freedom to, once they graduate and they do their work, and they've been on campus 3 and 4 years and putting in everything, and they have an opportunity to go somewhere else, let the player be taken care of first. Fans can deal with it when fans have to deal with it. Coaches can deal with it when coaches have to deal with it. What I like is to see the players taken care of. Now, the scenario you laid out, sure, that could happen. That could happen. But you know what? Smaller teams are always going to be prone to maybe a guy is better in college than he thinks, or maybe he's not getting this opportunity, and suddenly he can go to Alabama. That's always been on the table. You would just have to, there was always a year kind of in the way. Now that year's taken away. I don't know that it's going to be the Wild Wild West. I don't know that there's going to be much in the way of this happening very much, but I'm glad that the player is getting taken care of first and foremost.
Well, don't you think that there's a risk, though? I mean, and I'm not saying this is going to be just Alabama. I think it's going to happen to a lot of the top-tier teams. Don't you think there's a risk that all of a sudden Bama's losing a backup, you're losing a Brandon Kennedy, all of a sudden it becomes a cherry picking. It can become this thing where all these players are looking at it, players from possibly Ole Miss or possibly Florida or possibly some other program, and saying, boy, you know what, they're really in a good spot to win a national title this year. Let me jump on that wagon. I think it's going to happen more often than a lot of fans are comfortable with.
Maybe. I mean, football is much like life. The big fish do eat the little fish. But personally, again, once you take care of the players first, I don't really care if Florida gets upset one year or if South Carolina gets upset one year because a player goes here, a player goes there. It's in the name of making the game better for the players, and I think whatever comes after that is okay.
Jamie Blanton weighing in the comment section. I'm so glad this rule is passed to make Emperor Saban do the more morally correct thing he's always had the authority to do. And I agree with that too. Listen, you guys, like we always talk about, I'm a Bama guy on here. I talk about Nick Saban a ton, but as a former player, which comes first and foremost, I'm excited that this rule is put in place. I'm just going to caution everybody, though. This is something that I think could spiral out of hand in a hurry.
Yeah, but it's going to take a couple of years before we know what it's going to be. We don't know if it'll be the Wild Wild West out there. We don't know if this team will take advantage of it or this team. But you got to think that what you just said, teams like Alabama might be able to get players from smaller schools. But at the same time, there are guys that have signed with Alabama that were 4- and 5-star prospects that might never see the field.
Right.
And teams like Mississippi State and Arkansas and A&M and LSU or just whoever might be able to get some guys in their 4th or 5th year that can't play at Alabama. It's going to work both ways.
Well, but let me bring it down a level. Let me say it's not so much the smaller schools and Alabama combined. Let me bring it down a level to where I say, okay, Mississippi State's got Jeffrey Simmons. All of a sudden, he's upset with what his defensive line coach is saying to him. He says, you know what? I want to go over and be a part of that Ole Miss program right down the road. I want to stay in the state of Mississippi, but I want to head over to this other program right down the road. And you're not going to be able to do anything about it. He's going to be able to transfer. If he gets his degree, he's going to be able to transfer within the conference and head right down the road to Ole Miss and be a part of whatever their program is putting together. It's not so much to me the Alabama and the rest or the Georgia and the rest. It's that these rivalries all of a sudden become a much bigger deal to a lot of these players.
It's just going to be a new world that we live in. It's going to be okay. We'll have to live with it.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of rivalries too, guys, the thing that brings Nick Saban into all of this is that he gained criticism from trying to block offensive lineman Brandon Kennedy from going to UT or Auburn. He felt singled out by the criticism, but then on the other hand, he also said, but Alabama could be one of the schools that benefits most from this. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I think that Nick Saban was trying to make everybody slow down a little bit. And it's like I said, I agree with the rule that's been put into place, but I think that Nick Saban, maybe too much, maybe to his detriment, sometimes gets in front of the camera and thinks, you know what, I've got to be the voice of some of these college football programs, or I have to be the voice of college football. Maybe even if it is not good for my program, I have to come out and ask the question, is this good for our game? Nick Saban does that a ton. Every spring he comes in with something to talk about and says, is this good for the game? Is this the way we want it to be? Do we want hurry-up offenses that snap the ball as fast as possible? And he comes in with all this stuff. So I agree with what he was saying that we need to slow down. I'm still for the rule to be put into place, but I think he was right in at least asking the question, is this what we want to happen?
I'm not going to throw a telethon for Nick Saban. First of all, this is the price. This is the price of being king.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Nick Saban is the king of college football. He has earned his throne, 5 titles in 9 years at Alabama. He has earned his way onto that spot of being the guy that the media goes to and says, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Nobody's asking the Iowa State coach what he thinks. Nobody's asking the Washington State coach what he thinks. Well, actually, Mike Leach, they might ask him, but for a totally different reason. But nobody's asking those guys. They're asking Nick Saban because Nick Saban is the face of college football right now, and he is the one that got him to that position. I will say this. If a player plays 3 years, 4 years, and graduates, that player should be able to go wherever he wants. I mean, if you are a regular graduate student, you can go wherever you want. Once you graduated Alabama, you could have gone anywhere in the country to finish up your school. And I feel like it's high time this happened. And Nick Saban probably shouldn't get all the media attention about this. It should be spread out, but that's kind of the price of doing business when Nick Saban's involved.
Yeah, I don't know how and where Nick Saban kind of became the moral authority when we talk about college football. It's kind of crazy to me because all this attention gets shed on him. And I guess, listen, his opinion was so big and so polarizing that it was, it starts blowing up and things. And he says, why is this on me? I think I just want you guys to, kind of enforce the rule that was already in place. I will say this, though, just in terms of being a devil's advocate for what you're saying. Graduate transfers, they can transfer without sitting out a year. They just don't play football, right? You can go wherever you want to after you graduate from playing football. You just can't play football in the next place until now. And now it's different. Now I love it. And now, listen, Brandon Kennedy can head down to Auburn. He can be a part of what Gus Malzahn's doing, and it's all for the better of the players.
And the last thing I'll say about this, I don't really agree. I mean, Alabama, they're going to be a team that benefits, but other teams are going to benefit just as much. It's just going to be different sides of the same coin. Alabama's going to be able to go out there and say, hey, you want to come play for a national title year last year? Come on. While other teams in the conference will be able to reach up into Alabama's roster and say, hey, Nick Saban hasn't played you for 4 years. He's not going to play you next year.
Yeah.
So come on. It's going to work both ways.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, taking Nick Saban out of the spotlight here, let's bring another school to light that's my alma mater, and that's Ole Miss. So this is the whole other point. Sorry, Brandon. The whole other side to this thing, the other point is this could help undergrads as well, this ruling on Friday. So the SEC passed a proposal to allow players that are under NCAA mandated postseason bans at their school to transfer within the conference without having to sit out a season. So this rule is of immediate help to Florida, which welcomed former Ole Miss receiver Van Jefferson into the program this offseason. Do you guys agree with this. And again, I'm going on this side of agreeing. Even though I went to Ole Miss, I believe that, like Shea Patterson, I believe that those players should be freely able to go to another school.
Thank you for lobbing me this softball. I appreciate it. The Ole Miss rule, where, you know, if you sign with somewhere and they get under crippling sanctions and can't go to a bowl for 2 years, you can go somewhere else. I just think it is a slippery slope because Ole Miss had extenuating circumstances, and I don't care what you're typing right now on Facebook, Mike. You're not going to make me look bad.
I'm not. I'm not.
I don't care. There could be extenuating circumstances, as Ole Miss might have misled these guys in the class of 2016, so maybe you put them to the side. But anything ever that is in favor of players being more free to transfer and to get out and play football and look into their future and try to make the best of it, I'm for.
And we were talking before the show, too. I think that these players should be able to go anywhere in the country. This shouldn't just be an SEC rule.
No, yeah, and here's the thing. I like the rule, and obviously, like I said, I'm one of those guys that's all about liberal transfer rules. I think that I look at it as a contract situation, and if Ole Miss didn't uphold their end of the contract, then guess what? The contract doesn't stand. Then you get to go somewhere else. You get to leave. Doesn't matter who the head coach is. Doesn't matter if it's Hugh Freeze or Matt Luke or whoever. If Ole Miss, as an institution, didn't uphold their part of that contract, then guess what? The contract is void. I get to head elsewhere. The problem I have with the ruling is that this is like 3 years in a row that these rules are being kind of pushed that just benefit teams in the now. It's like it's taken a situation like this for this to happen, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what? That should be a rule. It happened last year with Malik Zaire down at Florida. Now it's the Van Jefferson thing, and all these. It just becomes this thing where, hey, what's the situation at hand, and how can we apply it, and how can we make things different? I don't like the reactionary nature of it, but I think it's something that should have been in place a long time ago.
You know, you call it reactionary, but isn't it just adaptability? Don't you want to take situations and you say, hey, that's not right, let's change it so it is right?
Yeah.
I actually applaud the SEC for taking this step. They had a bunch of players from Ole Miss that were there under circumstances that weren't that great, and the SEC stepped in. Van Jefferson now gets to go to Florida without punishment. You call it reactionary, and that's fine. It is reactionary. It is, but it's also adaptability, and I think the SEC is showing some forward thinking here.
Well, I think the reason I say reactionary and the problem, the reason I have an issue with it is because how many players at Ole Miss didn't go somewhere? You know, Van Jefferson walked out on his own and just took the risk of, hey, listen, maybe there's going to be a rule change. Maybe we can get this put into place. How many players stayed at Ole Miss under a bowl ban and thought, you know what, I can't go somewhere else inside of the SEC, so I'm going to stay in Oxford, Mississippi. And now that now they get caught looking back at last season or this season coming up and saying, listen, you know what? That's just my loss because I didn't get to go anywhere else. I didn't take the risk that Van Jefferson did.
Well, nobody's ever voluntarily stayed in Oxford, Mississippi, first of all. Number two, the one thing I would say to this is you do have to watch the reactionary and the adaptability because every year something new might come up.
Right.
Every year, like next year this might come up, next year that might come up. All of a sudden you look 5 years down the road, you made 5 different rule changes that might contradict. You have to be very careful going forward if this is the approach you're going to take.
No, I agree with that.
Greg Steele in the comment section says, doesn't the NCAA still have to approve the Van Jefferson transfer? So how does all this work now?
I don't know all the details of it, but from what I understand, inside of the SEC is where this becomes a big deal, and for undergrads this becomes a big deal. And it has to start with the SEC, right? And this was SEC spring meetings this past weekend, so getting that bridge is a big deal.
Well, also, the NCAA has already set precedent that they're going to allow. They allowed Shea Patterson. They allowed other players down, I think it's South Florida, Trey Nixon. They've allowed other players to do it, so I don't think NCAA rules are going to be a problem here.
All right, let's dive into some other schools now with topic number 2, and that is going to be our dark horse list. We get this from a Texas writer. 3 SEC teams show up on a national championship dark horse list after spring ball. This comes from Andrew Miller. He is a contributor to multiple different Texas sites. He tweeted this, okay? So South Carolina sits at number 2, Texas A&M number 7, Mississippi State number 8. All right, this is a hot take. Mike, if you were placing your bet right now, which one of these SEC teams could you see in the postseason?
Yeah, at the risk of Brandon coming across the table at me at Mississippi State at number 8 right there, and obviously the kickback I'm gonna get from not naming South Carolina here, there is no other answer but Texas A&M. If you're wagering your money, if you're talking about dark horses, it's Texas A&M. The talent's there. The offensive line should be good enough. The running backs are there. They have good wide receivers. They have good quarterbacks. They have a really good defensive line, good linebacking core. And they have a head coach that's not a first-time head coach, that has proven that he can develop players, that has proven that he can win a national title, that has proven he can navigate the waters of a tough schedule and go on and win a national championship. Now, are we talking about college football playoff? Are we talking about national championships? I don't know, but I'm putting my money all over Jimbo Fisher, who has been in the pilot's chair before at a program, who knows what to do with talented players, can develop these guys, can make sure they're getting developed in the weight room, and put them in the right places. I mean, Nick Starkel, Travion Williams, Dalen Mack, Kingsley Kike. Those guys are going to be stars under Jimbo Fisher the way they were never stars before when you were talking about under Kevin Sumlin.
Oh, that's great, Mike. That's great.
Let me borrow this really quick.
Yeah. Listen, first of all, two things. Mike, you're 6'6", 300. I'm not coming across the table. Number two, that's just an awful take. All right,
Okay.
Texas A&M.
Tell me why.
Texas A&M is a soft football program. They've been a soft program for years under Kevin Sumlin. It's going to take Jimbo Fisher more than an offseason to repair that damage. They are a soft football program. That's why they wither in November every single year, no matter who's on the schedule. South Carolina, they're a bad football team pretending to be a good one. They went 9-4 last year. They lost to a couple of bad teams. They're not a good football team. The answer, hi, I didn't bring my cowbell. The answer is Mississippi State. 18 returning starters. They got Nick Fitzgerald, an all-SEC caliber quarterback. They got Jeffrey Simmons, a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. They got the SEC leader in sacks. They got the SEC leader in interceptions. They are loaded, and nobody seems to notice. Now, I will say this. We're talking about dark horses. That puts Alabama, that puts Auburn, that puts Georgia to the side. We assume they are national title contenders. But if you're giving me a list of LSU, Texas A&M, South Carolina, and Mississippi State, I'm putting Mississippi State at the top of that list. Mississippi State has beaten Texas A&M 3 out of the last 4 years. They usually beat South Carolina. South Carolina is just not good enough yet. I think it's Mississippi State. And I would think that, just looking on paper, if I weren't a slobbering Mississippi State fan.
Now, I have to question, though, where you're going with the head coaching conversation. You're not worried at all about Joe Moorhead being at the helm of this program, which honestly, I don't blame you. I mean, we're all going to put the maroon glasses on at some point here when you talk about Mississippi State, but I have so many questions about a first-time head coach going to a college football playoff, and that's what we're talking about, a dark horse for a college football playoff. You're trying to tell me a coach who's never really coached his way into that situation all of a sudden is going to show up in Starkville, Mississippi and take that team to the college football playoff?
It's not about the coach as much as it is about the roster he is inheriting. And second of all,
it's gotta be both.
Second of all, it does have to be both. But second of all, you're talking about Jimbo Fisher, who has taken better teams than he's going to have at A&M this year and not gone to the playoff. He's taken better teams, and he has underachieved with those teams in a much worse football conference. Hannah, don't touch me. I'm okay. Listen, I can listen to South Carolina arguments. I can't listen to Texas A&M arguments. They fade every single year. They all the time start off 6-0, 5-1, 7-0, and they end up 7-5, 8-4 in some tire bowl somewhere in New Mexico, and we wonder what happened to Texas A&M. It's Texas A&M. That's what happened. Jimbo Fisher is not going to change that in 6 months.
I cannot believe you're making this argument right now. I'm about to fall off my stool right now that you're making the argument that it's Texas A&M, so this is never going to happen. What you're talking about, putting Mississippi State in that spot?
Who's been closer the last 3 years, Mike?
Texas A&M had a Heisman winner 5 years ago.
That was 5 years ago.
I mean,
he's in jail now.
This is a head coach at a program that is well above average historically, right? I mean, I'm not going to say they're
this is not the well above average.
But I can't believe you're starting to point to the history, being like, oh, they're Texas A&M and they're soft. When you were talking about the team in Starkville, Mississippi, I'm rooting for all these teams.
That went to College Station and won 35-14 last year and brings back 18 starters.
Well, we're going to see what happens then. But I'm just telling you right now that I can't believe you're pointing at the history of a program as to why something can't happen and then telling me Mississippi State can do it.
You're pointing at Jimbo Fisher and saying he's the difference when he went 6-7 at Florida State last year.
Well, he did. He quit on the team. He knew he was going to Texas A&M.
That's the guy who's going to get you to the playoffs.
Because he's been there before. He can develop the players.
He was
He's seen it happen.
He was there when he had Jameis Winston. He's never been there without Jameis Winston, and Jameis Winston isn't showing up to College Station. They don't have a public.
Okay. Time out.
Nick Starkel. Okay.
We have some people concerned with why you guys are completely ruling out South Carolina in this.
They're not very good.
Okay.
They went 9-4 last year. I think they lost to Kentucky. I think they lost to A&M. They were not very good last year.
They put up.
They play in a bad division. And I believe Florida's going to be a better football team than Carolina. I believe Georgia's going to be a much better football team than South Carolina.
Now, listen, I'm not going to pile on Will Muschamp. I think he's a good football coach. I think he's in a good spot with South Carolina. He's recruiting, and you guys that watch the show every day, he's recruiting at an all-time high right now, better than I ever thought he would be capable of. I mean, his recruiting rankings are headed up to the top of the dial. But we're talking about an offense under Jake Bentley with Deebo Samuel, obviously a couple games last year, but they have playmakers all over the field. And still, you go up against teams like Kentucky, teams like Tennessee, and you're putting up 15 points. You're putting up 2 touchdowns. And I know it was Kurt Roper, and Kurt Roper got fired, and Brian McClendon comes in, and they put up a bunch of points against Michigan in the bowl game, and they do a bunch of good things. And now I'm supposed to believe that it's up-tempo, and Zach Bailey's moving into guard, and the guard's moving back into center, and Deebo Samuel's coming back healthy, and everything's going to come together for South Carolina. I cannot look at South Carolina and think they're more than a 9-win team. I just can't. I think that when you look at last year's, they should never beat NC State. They beat a ton of teams by 1-score games. Usually those are going to even out. I think they were 6-1 in 1-score games last year, something along those lines. Those things will even out over time. And until I see Brian McClendon and Jake Bentley take this next step and Will Muschamp find the interior defensive line he needs to be successful, I'm going to have questions about a championship dark horse contender. I think the defensive lines and the offensive lines at these other places make me think it's possible. It's just not like that at South Carolina right now.
Final thoughts.
This is coming up in the Facebook comment section, and I agree with it. The one thing I will say for South Carolina, their path to a national championship or playoff is easier than A&M's. It's easier than Mississippi State's. They play in the East. It's an easier division. If they can beat Georgia in week 2, look out. They're all of a sudden the favorite in the East. So the path,
and I think they could sneak up on Georgia.
The path is there. The path is there for South Carolina. The path is not there for A&M. A&M has the toughest schedule in the country this year.
That's a very good
Their
point.
4 SEC road games are at Carolina, at Mississippi State, at Alabama, and at Auburn. That is terrible. And oh yeah, they play Clemson. That's 5 possible losses, and they could be a good team. So I do think Carolina has a better path. I think they're the 3rd best team of that group of 3.
I think that, and by the way, South Carolina and Texas A&M have a common opponent this year. It's going to be Clemson, and Clemson's coming to College Station. I think that is a game where Texas A&M could pull a ton of notoriety early in the year. When you talk about week 2, Clemson going to College Station, they could pull that off. It could make a lot of noise. South Carolina could do the same thing with Georgia too.
Possibly. The week 2 is definitely going to be interesting, and we'll kind of flip things around very, very quickly. But I just I look at that group, and to be honest, I don't get inspired by any of their chances to get to the college football playoff because I am a state.
Now the honesty comes out.
Well, I am a state fan, so I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I still like that team better than A&M and better than Carolina.
I don't know about you guys. I feel a little heated in here. Yeah. Let's cool off and go to the lake. Let's head to the lake. That is item number 3 on our 1st and 7 today. Head coach Nick Saban takes a bunch of the Alabama players out to the lake for a nice, cool, sunny day, and they run out of gas. Here, we've got something to cheer you guys on.
All that other boat, we ain't got no gas.
We ain't got no gas. We ain't got no gas.
Go to another boat. We ain't got no. Man, they gotta get me from out you, man. I ain't no boat.
Hey, who's responsible for this,
Go to
man?
another boat.
Hey,
We ain't got no gas.
out of pocket.
I thought that was him.
Man, we done got stuck on the boat, y'all. If y'all want to find Coach Saban, you know where to come.
Man, y'all won't find. Y'all need to find me. and I can't really survive out here. And bro, I'm trying to get back to shore, bro. Bro.
I'm coming, bro.
Out in the middle of the lake, or did someone come and rescue you?
I don't know. Nick Saban's yelling, "Hey, tell that other boat out here we ain't got no gas," and then all of a sudden everybody kind of erupts and they're like, "Oh, we thought." It's like he didn't say it at first, but then he was like, "Hey, make sure you kind of hail that other boat over there and tell them we ain't got no gas right now." That's Terrell Lewis, the defensive end right there, kind of signaling the fact that they don't have any gas right now.
Have you ever been on a boat with Nick Saban?
I definitely have. And listen,
you have.
I think it's funny. I think it's funny too because when I was on a boat with Nick Saban, everybody says Nick Saban's more relaxed at this point in his career. When I was on a boat with Nick Saban, it's like an Argyle vest and like slacks, and he didn't want to ding his boat up, so he takes his loafers off, and he still has like these Argyle socks on, and he's got the Alabama emblem, and he's like, "All right, let me go take these guys around the lake a couple times." He pulled me on a tube. He almost tore my hands off. He was so violent.
He pulled you on the tube?
Yeah.
How much gas do you need for that?
Yeah, I don't know. We almost ran out. He had Terrence Cody on before me, all 400 pounds of him. So I don't know how much gas he had that day, but we didn't run out.
It's a very interesting video. It's a funny video. My question is, why is he wearing a New York Yankees shirt?
He's friends with Joe Girardi. Joe Girardi and A-Rod both came to speak to the team. I just can't tell y'all enough, though. This is the calmer, like, this is Grandpa Saban. Right. You know what I'm saying? When Saban,
this is not the Saban
No,
you knew.
this is not the Saban I knew. I think it's funny because this becomes a talking point. When Saban took over the program 10 years ago, this is not something you saw. This was not like, swim trunks and Yankee shirt. This was Nick Saban saying, okay, let's get this on film. Let's take a picture of this, and then let's get off the boat. I got recruits to call right now. And now he seems much more at ease.
I want to know who picked him up. What if it was an Auburn fan or a Tennessee fan?
You all just stay out there.
Y'all are good.
Can you imagine, though? You're on Lake Tuscaloosa, you're driving your boat around, and you're thinking, oh, somebody needs help. And you pull up, and it's Nick Saban, Tua Tagovailoa, Terrell Lewis,
There were like
Carter.
14 people on that boat.
There's people all over that boat. Jalen Hurts. I mean, can you imagine pulling up on them? And people will pay to get on that boat over in Tuscaloosa normally, and somebody's got to rescue them.
First of all, who wears an Argyle sweater on a boat? Second of all, go Braves.
Go Braves indeed.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
All right, guys. Alabama's rival Auburn is our topic number 4 on the list, and this is an update from the Auburn arborist. He updates the status of Toomer's corner. Excuse me, guys. Here's the quote. He says, they're in fair condition at this point. The root development has been very good, so we're hopeful. Right now, we're just asking the fans to help us protect the trees. By not rolling them, the university has not determined whether or not the trees will be strong enough to roll this fall, but that decision will most likely be made later this summer. So this is relevant because Brandon Walker absolutely loves this topic. This is relevant though because it's just coming out. Football season's right around the corner, and this is a huge tradition. I absolutely love SEC football traditions. I think they're the best in the entire country. And there is a chance after the poisoning from Harvey Updike and then the fire in 2010 that Auburn fans finally have some solid trees.
Yay.
Brandon.
Yay. They have solid trees.
Hey, it's the off season, okay? We're trying to find some topics.
It is the off season. I know you went to Ole Miss, so you guys very much overrate trees there in the Grove. But these trees, it seems like every year there's a story about these trees. They are trees. It's 2 trees. They put toilet paper in them. Why is this news? I guess I've made South Carolina fans mad. I've made A&M fans mad. I just don't understand why there's an arborist going to the media and giving updates on a couple of trees. And second of all, Harvey Updike poisoned them. There was a fire. These are the most resilient trees I've ever seen in my life.
These are new ones.
These are new ones.
These are new ones, yeah.
These are new trees.
These were planted a couple of years ago after the fire.
Oh, so these are young trees.
The ones that Harvey Updike killed, I think they had to take those.
So these trees have not been through the adversity.
Right,
yet.
these trees haven't faced the adversity down there.
Right.
They haven't had the press.
These are redshirt freshman trees.
These trees have not had the press yet down in Auburn right now. It's where, an arborist has to go quote to the newspaper. Listen, I don't have a hot take on this, but I'm rooting for these trees just so the Harvey Updike thing can go away for Bama fans. I'm not a Harvey Updike guy. I don't like, you got too much Bama in me. That's cool.
I saw you texting him earlier today.
Yeah, I met Harvey. I was telling him to make sure he stays away from the softball fields these days because he runs into a little bit of trouble. But it is what it is, man. It's I'm rooting for them. Hopefully they bounce back and they're able to do whatever they want to do. If they can roll them this year, that's great. But they got some tough road games. I don't know that rolling them at home would have been as fun this year without Georgia and Bama coming to Auburn.
Yeah, they got some tough road games. It's gonna be a weird year in Auburn. Like you said, they go to Tuscaloosa, they go to Athens, they go to all these places. So I'm not sure how much celebrating they're going to be doing in Auburn this year. I can see them being 11-1. I can see them being 7-5. I can see so much happening with Auburn this year. But thank God the trees are okay here in June.
Okay, so the trees are not out of the woods yet.
Oh,
we will keep you updated for all tree updates. Go to bwalker_SEC at Twitter. And we are rooting for the trees. All right, guys, that brings us to some recruiting updates and a Mississippi State topic, which I know this guy right here cannot wait for. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about Texas A&M jumping up to number 2 nationally in 2019. I feel like this came out of absolutely nowhere, out of behind only number 1 Oklahoma. So they just landed a 5-star. They have 13 current commitments for the 2019 class. Just landed 5-star offensive lineman Kenyon Green. He committed to the Aggies while on an unofficial visit this weekend. He announced his decision on Twitter. Here he goes. He says, "I'm home. #Gig'emGang19."
First of all, I got to correct you a little
Okay,
bit. They're not behind Oklahoma in the composite.
Oh, they're behind Alabama.
They're behind Alabama, which I'm sorry to tell y'all is
the
number 1 team, the 247 composite that we use all the time. Alabama is the number 1 ranked recruiting team. Now, with that being said, we've got to start taking notice.
I don't know what list I was looking at.
We've got to start taking notice of Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher and what he's doing on the recruiting trail right now. It was like, it went from, oh man, that's a good story. That's pretty cool. He's starting to get a bunch of guys to sign on the dotted line. Brian Williams was a big one. It's like, oh man, that's cool. He pulls a guy from Alabama on signing day last year, Bobby Brown. All of a sudden, this has become real. Like, this topic is becoming real right before our eyes. And a lot of people say, oh, Jimbo Fisher could do great things at Texas A&M. This is step number one. And I think that if you're a fan of another SEC West team or another SEC team like I am Bama or Mississippi State, start taking notice of what's going on down in College Station right now. This is something that when he got the job, myself included, a lot of people pointed at it and said, boy, he's got the facilities, he's got the fan base, he's got the recruiting base in the state of Texas. The sky is the limit in terms of what Jimbo Fisher can do there, and it's coming to fruition right in front of our eyes with this latest commitment.
I know this is going to shock you, but I got two things here. Two reactions to this big-time recruiting commit for Texas A&M. Number one, earlier I talked about them being a soft program and how the last couple of years they have withered at the end of the season. This is how you fix it. This is how you go out and get five-star offensive linemen. You get the tough guys. You get the big uglies up front, like my friend here, Mike Johnson. You get the guys. You get the guys up front to dominate football games on the line of scrimmage. You are no longer a soft team once you get those guys in place and get them trained up and developed. Number two, yes, Jimbo Fisher is recruiting at a high level, but Kevin Sumlin also recruited at a very high level, and for whatever reason, it didn't always translate. It went to 7-4, 8-4, stuff like that. Jimbo Fisher is recruiting at the same level, probably a little bit higher, but I do trust that Jimbo Fisher is going to develop these players into tougher football players than Kevin Sumlin ever did.
Yeah, no, I think the angle to look at, and Lord knows I talk about this all the time on the show, the strength and conditioning coach down there. They've got a new strength and conditioning coach in place. Jimbo Fisher knows how to develop these players. It's, it comes to this year where in year number one, hey, put your system in, make sure everybody understands your process, kind of get your feet wet in terms of what Jimbo Fisher will try to do this year. I think they're going to be a very good football team. I think they're going to shock some people. But it's like you mentioned, the schedule plays a big part, and I don't know what they'll do this year, nationally. Looking into year number two, though, it's going to start to get scary. This guy can develop people. You can call him soft. I tend to look at the fact that I don't know if there's a ton of SEC football players that are soft or football teams that are soft. I think that some of them just aren't as developed. I think you could make that case at Florida last year to where they just, strength and conditioning wise, they couldn't make it at the end of the game, so they looked soft at the end of the game. They couldn't keep up with some of the other teams. I think we're looking at a U-turn there in terms of what that is. And some of the players they have in place with some of the names they've had come through that program are going to look a lot better under a coach that can develop them.
Yeah, I do think you're right. The U-turn is happening, and they are going to get better at finishing games. They're going to get tougher up front. Jimbo Fisher had that at Florida State, and he's going to have it at A&M. He just can't do it in one offseason. Yeah. He can't do it in 6 months. He can't be ready this season to have somebody that goes out there and beats up on you for 4 quarters. It's going to take him a year or two, and recruits like this, it's going to happen sooner than later, just not this year.
Yeah, to me, I can't wait to see where they finish too, because this is June, right? This is June. There's still a ton of time go left until signing day. We're gonna add names. We're gonna take names off. But if this trend continues and he's able to finish with a top 3 class or possibly a number 1 class, I think it's one of the biggest stories of the SEC in terms of what's happening this year.
It's going to be a big story. It's going to be a big story. But I'm not anticipating Jimbo Fisher not being able to recruit at A&M. Jimbo Fisher's probably going to be a top 5 recruiter every single year at A&M. It's just what happens between September and the end of November. That's what I'm worried about with Texas A&M. I know they can win in February. They've been doing that.
It's a fair question.
Vince Blank in the comment section says, where's Georgia on this list? So in honor of BA, and since I'm not looking at the right list, Mike, where is Georgia on the 24/7 composite list?
They're in 10th place right now.
Okay.
And they've got 3 5-stars, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I think even Brandon Adams, and you guys follow along the show every day know this, even Brandon Adams, when he looks at it, would say, I don't think Georgia's recruiting at a level that he probably thought they would at this point in time. Right. They're just not. I mean, they've been told no a couple of times. They're very, I don't want to say top heavy because they've got the 5 stars and they have their aims on a couple more, but they're going through a lot of the same things at Georgia that Bama went through last year, where they've got a limited number of signings. I think you can sign 21 this time around, and they're having to be very particular about who gets a committable offer.
Who was number 1 in recruiting last June 4th? You don't know, do you?
Is it? I don't know.
I have no idea who was number 1. Doesn't matter who's number 1 on June 4th. Georgia built their recruiter. They built their number 1 class through the season, and they went 11-1. They go to the national championship. They built their recruiting class in the fall of last year. They had some already on board, but they built it in the fall and in the winter. And I feel like, yeah, it's fun to have the number 1 class, number 2 class right now, but you've got a lot of building left to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, listen, that comes from promises in my book. I think that Kirby Smart last year, before the season started, he looks at some of these recruits and says, we're going to be good. We're going to make a run at the SEC championship. We're going to beat all these teams. We're going to go up to South Bend. We're going to beat Notre Dame. We're going to get your college football playoff. You just watch what we're going to do. And it's like the recruits look at it and say, boy, you know what? He was telling the truth. They're a really good football team. They're built from the inside out. Strong running game. You know, the running backs look at it and say, boy, they really do have a strong running game. They're paying attention to the game on the ground. Their offensive line looks good. They start bringing in all these offensive line recruits. So I think it's a momentum. And I think that right now, though, you have to take a look at Texas A&M and wonder, okay, if Texas A&M does go into week 2 and beat Clemson in College Station, and they are able to knock off, an LSU football team they haven't beaten quite some time, or a Bama football team they haven't beaten in a few years, then you start to turn those recruits' head, and I think that momentum just keeps building towards signing day.
Yes, I agree.
That was easy. That was easy.
Finally. All right, topic number 6, which this guy has been waiting all show for.
I have not been waiting for it. You're going to make it
for this?
You're going to make these people think that I made this a Mississippi State show. I didn't.
No, this was my idea. So Mississippi State flips an OU commitment over the weekend. That is 4-star safety Jaron Jones, along with 2 other guys as well, which you can get into, Brandon. Here's his tweet. He said, I would like to thank fans, players, and coaches from the University of Oklahoma. The level of love and appreciation I received is amazing. It's time that I set my own standards and create a legacy. This experience has been crazy, but I can't do my state like this. With that being said, I would like to flip my commitment to Mississippi State University. You can either hate it or love it. No interviews. I'm done. I'll be wearing number 1 in college. See you soon. This is good for Joe Moorhead. Joe Moorhead is taking things seriously in Starkville.
The recruiting so far is so good for Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State. And that was the question when you hire a Penn State guy that a lot of people in the SEC didn't know. Can he recruit down here? Can he recruit at this level? He is blowing Dan Mullen's recruiting out of the water early on. Dan Mullen always won games at Mississippi State, always did great things, never recruited at a very high level, never got over the top 25, top 20. Joe Moorhead at number 13 right now. Can he hold on to that? Well, Mississippi's loaded this year in recruiting. Jaron Jones is a big deal. He's a 6'2", 200-pound safety out of Northwest Rankin High School in Mississippi. He was committed to Oklahoma. He's got offers from Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Georgia. All the requisite big-time programs have offered this guy. This is a level of recruiting Dan Mullen never really got to at Mississippi State, and if Joe Moorhead can get there and stay there, look out.
Well, I'm glad this topic has come up because obviously BA and I don't get to talk a ton about Mississippi State recruiting,
right?
Or Joe Moorhead and what he can do.
Are you being sarcastic right now?
No, I'm serious because I have a question for you.
Okay.
When Jim McElwain took the job down in Florida, I knew Jim from his time as offensive coordinator up at Alabama, and I knew he was a good coach, but I wondered about the recruiting trail. I did. From being a Pacific Northwest guy, an Eastern Washington grad, spent a lot of his coaching career at Fresno State, Colorado State. I wondered about how well he would connect with the state of Florida. Could he go into the backyard and get some of these Florida guys out of there and really connect with that program? I'm not sure he ever did. I'm not sure that really ever came easily to him. I think with the twang he had out of Eastern Washington, it became hard for him to kind of connect with those guys. Do you not worry as a Mississippi State fan that could possibly play out again in the state of Mississippi for Joe Moorhead?
Yeah, I worried about it. I worried about it the second he was hired. I wondered, can this guy come from Penn? He's from Middle Pennsylvania. He was coaching at Penn State. Always been in the Big Ten. Never been in the SEC. It's a different world down here. College football season is not from September to November down here. It's from January 1st to December 31st. It's all year round. I worried if this would chew him up and spin him out. It is not. He has hired some big-time recruiters on staff. Charles Huff, a big-time running back coach, number 4 recruiter in the country last year at Penn State. He is attacking recruiting. Dan Mullen never really did that at Mississippi State, was never very aggressive. Joe Moorhead already has a 4-star quarterback commitment from Charlotte, North Carolina, a 4-star defensive end from Nashville. Dan Mullen does not sign those guys at Mississippi State. Joe Moorhead is. What is somebody saying? You're smiling too big. You are smiling too big.
I got to point to my guy Cliff Nelson over here in the YouTube comment section because he's calling you out a little bit. He says, look how quickly BW turns on Mullen. Last year, Mullen was the best coach in football, not going anywhere.
I didn't turn on Mullen.
Joe is the best, and Mullen never recruited to his level.
I didn't turn on Mullen. Mullen is an outstanding football coach.
Mullen turned on you, is that what you're saying?
Dan Mullen is an outstanding football coach, and during the season, in games, he is terrific. Dan Mullen never recruited at a high level at Mississippi State. That is a fact. I always live with it because if you're winning in September, if you're winning in October at a level State hasn't seen, I'm happy. Right. And I'm happy for Dan Mullen. He gets to go down to Florida. I don't think Florida fans are going to put up with the level of recruiting State fans put up with.
That's such a good thing to point to, too, because you wonder, the news hasn't been flowing in as quickly as I thought it would for Florida. I mean, I think they've done some good things. I think they've changed it up. I think they've gone about it in a different way that Dan Mullen had to. But they're not flying in the way you wanted them to if you're a Florida Gators fan right now. And I think it's going to be interesting to kind of follow that topic as well.
Well, he can't recruit. Right. I mean, he's not a high-level recruiter. And down in Florida, he is surrounded by Mark Richt on the south. He's surrounded by Kirby Smart on the north, Willie Taggart to the west. He is surrounded by elite recruiters. It's going to be tough. If you're patient with him, he's going to give you a winner. But you're not going to win on signing day with Dan Mullen.
Especially in the state of Florida right now, the way the coaches
it's
are.
Rough
down
out
in the
there.
State of Florida
And then you got Nick Saban coming to Florida. You got Gus Malzahn coming to Florida.
Yeah.
It's rough out there.
Well, I think it's interesting, too. We talked about the 247 composite team rankings. Florida's still sitting at 27, so they've got 8 commits. They've got a lot of work to do in the coming months.
They do.
It'd be fun
Despite going to Ole Miss, I've always agreed with you that Mississippi State is kind of my dark horse for the SEC this season. They've got Nick Fitzgerald coming back, arguably the best backup quarterback in the SEC in Keaton Thompson. Arias Williams is amazing running back. Defense is coming around after graduating some players. I really feel like Mississippi State will 8-9 win season.
Is 9 wins okay for you this year?
Depends on who the losses are to.
Win the games you're supposed to.
I've got 10 games circled. I want a 10-win regular season. But if you win 9 and you lose to Alabama, Auburn, and LSU on the road in a close game, if one of the losses is to Kentucky or one of the losses is at Ole Miss, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But it depends on who the losses are to.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I think it's tough when you look at the schedule and the way it mounts up. You have to you are what your record says you are, but you have to take it with a grain of salt.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're going to leave you guys today with topic number 7, which is a quick update on SEC baseball regionals, and the Southeastern Conference is absolutely dominating. 8 teams could get through to the Super Regionals. That would be a record for the SEC. Right now, the teams that have advanced to the Super Regionals are Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Auburn. Teams on the bubble: Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Florida, UGA, South Carolina. Why the surge in baseball success this season?
Well, the SEC has always been great in baseball. It's always probably been the best baseball conference in the country. This year, it's reaching a level it might not have ever reached. There are 16 teams that go to Super Regionals. You're talking about 8 of them from one conference, a conference with 14 teams. That is incredible. And you've already got 3. Auburn looked good. Auburn went to NC State and just destroyed NC State in that regional. Arkansas destroyed their regional. Vanderbilt went to Clemson and just embarrassed Clemson on their home turf. Now Vanderbilt gets to host a Super Regional. You got all these teams going out there. I think Mississippi State's very close to getting through. I think Ole Miss has one more win to get. Georgia is on the verge of getting through. It's the best baseball league in the country, and we might be seeing it at an all-time high.
Yeah, no, obviously I don't follow baseball the way. I mean, listen, I think Bama finished 14th in the SEC.
They
didn't get invited to the tournament.
They did.
So I didn't have high hopes for them this year. I didn't follow along quite as much as some people did. But the drama that's been coming out of this tournament so far of SEC teams, it was Mississippi State with a 3-run homer the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I really do think that SEC baseball could be one of those things that really is taking itself to an all-time high. I'm not even saying we're seeing it at the pinnacle right now. I think there's still room to grow. If you involve a team like Alabama or some of the lesser-known teams, Georgia's come out of nowhere this year to really be nationally relevant. I think the sky's the limit.
Well, the sky is the limit. Florida's a defending national champion. LSU's won a national championship in the last 10 years. You've got several teams. Vanderbilt's won a national title in the last 5 years. You've got several national title contenders. And I know it's just baseball, and I know we got people on Facebook saying, oh, baseball, I don't care. I understand that, but the SEC is dominating at a level that you need to pay attention to, because the SEC is the best conference in the country in football. We all agree. SEC basketball is on the come up. Yeah. SEC women's basketball is on the come up. SEC softball is very close. And now baseball is far and away the best conference in the country, and it's just getting better. It's really fun to watch if you're an SEC fan.
And Alabama fans. Coach Bohannon at Alabama really walked into a sticky situation there, and he is turning things around because the program was in a disastrous state.
It was tough.
He came from Auburn to Alabama, but things are looking up for them.
I'd be lying if I didn't say that I expected a little more than 14th in the SEC in Bohannon's first year, but I think I'm with you. Things are looking up.
He's bringing it in, guys. Okay, we are going to leave you on this topic, though. Mississippi State is playing Oklahoma now, but this weekend they played number 7 Florida State, and a walk-off homer. We did this just for you, I promise. The rest of the week we will not have this much Mississippi State stuff, guys.
I did not sign off on this.
Hey, but this is an amazing clip. Let's take a look.
Off speed, high in the air, deep to left field. A walk-off for the Bulldogs. They stay alive.
That's awesome.
The surrender cobra. Oh, there's nothing worse.
I'm not going to say anything about Mississippi State right here. What I want to mention is SEC, we're all SEC fans here, right? We all get into SEC football and baseball and everything else. Dave Neal on the call right there. Dave Neal, one of the most underrated SEC announcers out there. It seems like every time an SEC team is doing something, Dave Neal might be right in the mix. He is a fantastic TV broadcaster.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, you guys stay tuned for all the scores and see who goes to the Super Regionals coming up very soon. Okay, we are going to end the show. What does BA say?
The way we do each and every week.
With the champion of life. And today, our champion of life, the executive VP of GM, wrecked his Corvette pace car at the Detroit Indy race. How does this happen?
You know what's nice about this though? Like, he doesn't have to explain this to his boss because he's the executive VP, right? You don't have to be like, man, that really got out of hand in a hurry and I just wanted to showcase the car. And this is not like this was an official pace car driver.
Look at this right here.
Just let it eat.
It spins out of nowhere.
I think that's absolutely incredible.
I can drive better than that.
Yeah.
Mike, you're a racing fan, right?
Yeah.
How hard do you have to try to wreck one of those cars on those wide tracks?
Listen, I don't know. I mean, the Grand Prix is a different deal. I'm a NASCAR fan, but just having that guy come around the corner, because it wasn't like he was creeping, right? I don't know how fast their pace car speeds are, but it's like, 60, I think, in NASCAR or something like that. That guy was riding out. He was like, I'm going to see what this thing's all about. Puts it in the wall, man.
Fantastic.
I don't know what his name is, but tough day at work today, I would imagine.
Yeah. I've actually done that in the SEC Country parking lot. In Mike's truck, actually. It was awful.
Please don't do that.
All right, guys, thanks so much for hanging with us and bear with us all week long as we take over the show. That's Mike Johnson. This is Brandon Walker, and I'm Hannah Chalker. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got a lot of good shows coming up. You can also watch their shows. Roll Tide Daily is on every day at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's correct.
On the Alabama SEC Country Facebook page, More Cowbell, which is a great show. Michael Schlaub and I are involved in producing that as well. That is every day at 11:30. 11:45. I produced the show and I don't even know. 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time on the Mississippi State page. The show is called More Cowbell. Check them out and check us out all week here on SEC Country Live. We'll see you tomorrow.